Hello and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve and today we're going through Game Week 2 team lineup. So to read out for you, those of you on the audio stream, I have Raya and net against Man United instead of Ward playing Arsenal. I think there's going to be goals in both of these games, to be honest, and so I'm just going with the keeper that's more likely to potentially keep a clean sheet, but it's mostly about save points here. I think Brentford are probably going to concede against United, and I reckon the Leicester and Arsenal game is actually going to probably consist of a few goals. So chuck Ward on the bench and see what United can chuck at Brentford at Brentford's home ground. Now, I'm not too sure what's happening with Man United. I'm not too sure who's going to be playing up front. If we're going to be playing Eriksen in a false nine again, I suspect that won't happen because it didn't work at all in the last game. No fault at Eriksen at all. He played amazing in that game. It's just we need a very good pressing attack in order to cover our defense, and the way we lined up again last week was just not at all what we'd been doing pre-season, and it all fell to pieces as you would probably expect it to, which is why I got so angry with the lineup in the last game. Just for those of you who aren't aware, I scored 72 points in the first game week of the season, which has me sitting at a rank of 1.07 million. So if we go across the back line, I've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, Cancelo, Zinchenko, who scored well for me in Game Week 1, and I'm starting James against Tottenham instead of my only playing bench member in Castagna against Arsenal. As I said, I think there'll be goals in that Leicester game, but also in the Chelsea-Tottenham fixture, I suspect that because Chelsea don't have a striker, or they don't have an out-and-out striker, that they will probably set up relatively defensively against Tottenham. I think you'll probably find James will be very closely linked to marking Son at a guess. Well, at least that's what I'd be looking at. I'd say Chelsea will set up to weather the storm and hopefully sneak a goal or maybe even two. In the fixtures last year, Chelsea beat Tottenham home and away 2-0 and 3-0. I can't remember which way around it was. I can't remember which one was the 2 or the 3-0. And so last season, Spurs didn't even score a goal against Chelsea. Obviously, things have changed this year, new teams and new players. But given that Chelsea don't really have too much of a striking outlet in order to send the ball through to hold up and then work play, I imagine a lot of the possession will probably be held in midfield and around the defenders, and so you may see a very possession-based game as opposed to a fluid attacking game, but could be wrong. Before I go into the midfield and stuff, just as another aside, in Game Week 1, every single one of my players was actually playing away, which was I didn't realise until it actually locked my team in. Typically I'd be a bit more careful of that, but what has happened on the flip side is Game Week 2, every single one of my players that I'm starting are all playing at home this week, which hopefully means more points in the sense that when you're playing at home you are more likely to attack for your fans and put on a bit more of a show, whereas when you're away from home you can more easily a little bit sit back and soak up the pressure. So we will see how this plays out across the weekend. In midfield, I've got Martinelli playing Leicester, I've got Salah playing Crystal Palace at home, I've got Neto playing Fulham at home, I've got De Bruyne playing Bournemouth at home, and I've got Luis Diaz again playing Crystal Palace at home. At the moment, I've got the captaincy on De Bruyne. We'll talk about the captaincy in a minute. And I've got Jesus sitting up front against Leicester. Now, my initial plan in Game Week 1 was to roll the transfer, kind of irrespective of what Kane or Haaland did in Game Week 1, and that was simply so that I could see two full matches of what Haaland actually brings to the Man City attack. In Game Week 1, what I did pick up is the formation is largely revolving around getting the ball to Haaland, as it should. Um, but even more so, even some of the balls coming out of midfield, Kevin De Bruyne was actually a little bit made this mistake a few times. They were almost looking for Haaland as the only penetrating ball forward. Now, that's all well and good. Haaland's quick. He's a great player. He's got a great touch on him. He gets into the channels. He can get around players and obviously shoot. He's got an amazing shot on him. But if City are just going to solely rely on just getting the ball to Haaland every single game week, it will become a pattern of recognition, quite easy to spot from the opposing managers, and potentially a little bit easier to defend against. And so I would suspect Man City, trying to get Haaland into the game. I'd say Pep would be like, okay, first 3 game weeks, we want to get the ball to Haaland as much as possible, get him on the board, get him scoring goals, get him feeling like he's part of the team, and get all the players in the City squad behind him comfortable and trusting that Haaland is your go-to man to score the goals. That's something that most managers will try to bet in for their new strikers. Strikers definitely perform on form, like in the back of their minds, even in game. If they've hit a shot and the shot wasn't quite right, it sits on your mind for the rest of the game. You kind of need to wipe that out with a better shot, or maybe the keeper makes an amazing save, and you're like, okay, that's a bit better, and you can get on with the match. There's a lot going on in the minds of strikers. And so I would suspect Pep would be doing his very best to make sure they get the most out of Haaland at the start of the season. I think that's also why Foden started game week 1, because what it looked like they were doing was trying to protect Haaland against having to do as much of the chasing down of the ball, like the high press. I don't think they wanted to eat into his energy for that sort of work, and so you saw De Bruyne and Foden pushing on in a lot higher for them to do a lot more of the work to take it away from Haaland. Pep looked like he just wanted to save Haaland for the attack, and in terms of your solo striker doing the press, he was doing it, but just not energetically. He was like, you see him when he was in on goal, that was his full bore energy, but when he's chasing down the defenders, he's not putting anywhere near that amount of information in, and probably because that's what Pep has told him to do until he gets up to match fitness. Of course, I'm just guessing here, but that's kind of what it looked like to me. And so, if I don't make any changes this week, I do have a actually very interesting decision on who do I captain this week. I've got both Salah and De Bruyne. Prior to game week 1, my plan was to captain De Bruyne in the home fixture against Bournemouth. I don't think that first game, Bournemouth versus Aston Villa, really shows too much about what Bournemouth are all about. I think there was more of a reflection of what Aston Villa are up to be honest. Similarly, in the Liverpool fixture with Fulham did play well, to be fair, but what they were really doing was just capitalising on Liverpool's mistakes. The fact that they didn't want to play the game at their normal quick pace. They almost looked lazy in some of the balls that they were putting through. I mean, Trent, he's normally pinpoint accuracy, with those balls, those 45-degree angle balls that go from right back right across to the likes of Diaz out on the wing, or Robertson if he's pushed up higher. That ball didn't make it quite often, and I know Trent looks a little bit relaxed in his delivery at the best of times, just normally, because he knows how to hit that ball, but it felt like Liverpool were almost playing with a slight amount of arrogance to them, or laziness, or they didn't quite respect Fulham's abilities. Fulham were obviously well up for it, and they were just going to go hardcore in on the press, and that worked really well because Liverpool didn't control the ball. Well, their touch wasn't quite there. I mean, 5 games into the season, Liverpool's touch is going to be primo, nothing like what you saw in game week 1, and so Fulham it's a great time to play the big boys at the start of the season because they too are not quite into game state and game flow. They're not quite, their touch is not pristine. There are small little areas that are coming in. We'll probably see that across most of the games in game week 2 as well. 90 minutes under the belt does definitely help, but now you're either playing away for the first time or home for the first time, and whatever fixture is being lined up, and you still, you'll be walking into that game a little bit nervous and potentially, not quite up to match fitness. So the way I've broken this down is in terms of I've gone for predictions of what I think the score is going to be. In the Liverpool Crystal Palace game, Crystal Palace don't have an attack really, a potent attack. Shall we put it that way? They will probably line up to soak up a lot of pressure and hope to counter Liverpool on the counter attack. I suspect this will probably, unless a goal goes in really early on in the game and Crystal Palace have to chase it down, I suspect Crystal Palace are probably going to sit quite deep in their half, and you may see about a 2-0 victory for Liverpool. If an early goal goes in, it may go 3-0, 3-1, maybe even to 4, but I suspect it's going to be in around the 2 to 3 goal buffer zone. Now, if Firmino was playing, I'd be more inclined to probably captain Salah here, because Firmino is your hold-up player who feeds in the players around him. Whereas when Nunez came onto the pitch last week, he caused absolute chaos in the defense, which was great to see from a Liverpool standpoint in attack. But what you also did see is Nunez and Salah making runs to similar spots. They're both attack-minded. They both have the same awareness of where balls should be played in order to score the goals, and so they were making very similar runs. And even in Salah's goal, they were literally about half a metre apart when Nunez received the ball to lay it off to Salah. It did look like, I think he intended to lay it off because I think he knew that Salah was there, but they were right next to each other, and typically what you would see was a lot more space with pulling a defender wide and the ball goes into Nunez and he would lay it off to Salah, but they were actually making almost an identical run there, and so they may end up stepping on each other's toes. You might find the points are shared between Nunez and Salah, or potentially even Diaz this week. And so with only a 2 to 3 goal predicted buffer, I think there's probably going to be more goals in that Bournemouth fixture for Man City. I'm predicting Man City Bournemouth to be probably about 4-0, 5-0 Man City. I don't see Bournemouth scoring at all. They will probably look at what Fulham did to Liverpool and try similar sorts of things. But Man City's just going to be way too classy and have just way too much possession of the ball and control of the game and control of how quickly the game plays as well. So if there's 4 to 5 goals up for grabs in the City game, I would hope that De Bruyne is involved in 2 to 3 of those, and so should come out with more points than Salah. Now there's some big risks here. Obviously anyone who went Salah and Kane in game week 1 will either have gone from Kane to Haaland, to captain Haaland this week, or they would have been priced out of that and potentially not willing to take the hit. They will be captaining Salah this week. At a guess, I don't think they would be captaining Kane away to Chelsea. And so it's either going to be a captain of Salah or Haaland, and I suspect Haaland's EO for this fixture is probably going to be about, your 150 plus percentage, and he could quite easily come away with a hat-trick in this game, which the only way I'm going to be able to keep up with that amount of points is that De Bruyne assists all 3 of those goals, or they win 4-0, Haaland gets a hat-trick and De Bruyne gets a goal and 2 assists, which will probably come out about equal points. But that's a whole bunch of big ifs because obviously there's a lot of players in the Man City squad that can do the business, can score goals, can get the assists. And it's also, as just an aside, sorry, that with tying back to the Haaland not doing the press thing, it's probably why you'll also see Mahrez not start this week, because Mahrez does not do the press up front and, well, doesn't do it consistently, but also doesn't do as much defensive duties, whereas Foden runs around like a madman doing all sorts. So out of the two, I'm going to side with De Bruyne because I think there's a higher potential upside, plus it's sort of covering part of Haaland's points, I suspect. My other alternative is to sell De Bruyne down to about an 8 million midfielder and then upgrade Jesus to Haaland to captain him. Now that'll cost me a 4-point hit, obviously. However, Jesus playing Leicester at home could quite easily come away with a goal or two here. And so if I was to upgrade Jesus, I am potentially missing out on a goal or an assist. And the combination of Jesus and De Bruyne with De Bruyne captain might quite easily keep up with a Haaland and whoever I replace De Bruyne with in order to fund the move to Haaland. Now, if this was game week 3, it would be De Bruyne down to someone like Kulusevski, but I would not necessarily want to go to Kulusevski this week because of the fixture against Chelsea. And if I did jump on that fixture this week to bank in a transfer for game week 3 so I don't have to make it, then I'm almost shooting myself in the foot by taking De Bruyne versus Bournemouth and Jesus versus Leicester to switch to Haaland versus Bournemouth and then like a Kulusevski versus Chelsea, which is not a very high ceiling, potentially high ceiling fixture for Kulusevski. Or I go elsewhere with the 8 million to someone like maybe Madison or... I mean, Mount isn't really on the cards at the moment because it looks like he's lost all his set-piece duties to James, which is interesting development. That's why James did so well in the bonus points last week. But to go elsewhere, and with only 1 week's worth of data, it's actually still quite a hard choice as to which 8 million spot I would go for in the De Bruyne discussion. And so instead of just guessing at what that 8 million spot might be, I'm going to roll the transfer. I'm going to captain De Bruyne and hope that in the 3, 4 or 5 goals that Man City scores, De Bruyne gets at least a goal. Ideally a goal and an assist because that'll get him clearly in the bonus just because of De Bruyne and the amount of passes he normally does do and complete. And he should keep pace with Haaland, with the rest of the team chipping in case Haaland does go a little bit mental. And I have to keep up with it. So that's my plans running into game week 2. If you have... if you still have Kane in your team, would it be worth the hit to go Kane to Haaland? That question really does boil down to whether or not you have Salah in your team. Again, I would probably just captain Salah and hold on to Kane in that instance, unless you're very comfortable with the hit that you're going to take in order to fund the move to go from Kane up to Haaland. And that is probably the main piece of information that you need to weigh up in your mind as to risk versus reward there. So that's my game. That's my lineup for game week 2. If you did like that content, please do give this video a like, and if you are new around here, please do hit that subscribe button so you can be notified of any videos coming your way. And good luck for the game week, everyone. I wish you all the best. Cheers.